So in this video I'm going to be analysing Patrick Dorgu's best attributes alongside his weaknesses, before coming to an overall conclusion on whether he would be a good signing for Manchester United considering what we currently need, before I tell you about my theory as to why I think so many people in the fan base have an obsession with overrating players we are linked to. But first of all, let's just analyse Patrick Dorgu as a player. So initially Nuno Mendes was my first choice option in the left wing back role, but it now looks like he's going to be signing a new contract with PSG. I'm not sure if it's done already, which is very annoying because I was in the process of making videos with his name on the tactics board, and now I'm going to have to put disclaimers at the start of the video and keep repeating it throughout, so people don't keep commenting, you know, Mendes has signed a new contract, even though I will be saying it throughout the video, so watch out for that, it will gradually become annoying. But in comparison to Mendes, Dorgu is similar in many regards. Like Mendes, Dorgu is an aggressive front foot defender who possesses the explosiveness and the physical strength to be able to push out and apply pressure to the back of an opponent, sticking tight, stopping them turning and looking to win the ball back, which is of course very important in an aggressive pressing side. But he's also shown he does have the capabilities of reading situations quickly when passes are getting fed down his outside, wherefrom he has the acceleration to be able to get across and put in a strong sliding or standing tackle, or even just use his physical strength to get himself between the player and the ball. Now Dorgu isn't as good as Mendes positionally, though the PSG man is excellent at reading the game and being able to position himself almost like a left-sided centre-back, where he's able to get across and read a through ball before accelerating to get goal side of an opposition runner and make an interception. Now Dorgu's reading of the game and positional awareness isn't quite at that level just yet obviously, to the point where he could play comfortably as a left-sided centre-back, as I think Mendes could. But of course he definitely can develop this ability as he does have the physical and the defensive attributes to excel in these sort of areas. And maybe in a few years time he could be used as a left-sided centre-back in a back three, but definitely not right now. Now I will say I am slightly concerned with his 1v1 defending at the moment, as I feel he races out with the incorrect body positioning quite frequently, often leaving himself vulnerable to a quick shift of the ball, leaving himself wrong-footed and getting beaten on the other side. And his FBref report does showcase this, but before I show you that, a quick reminder, I do have an in-game Instagram group chat where we do have analysis and discussion throughout all the Manchester United games. I'll also prioritise questions from the group chat to answer in videos. And I'm also working on a tactical ebook which should be released towards the end of the month, so if you are in the group chat when that does come out, you will get it for free. So signing up to the $5 Patreon will be slightly cheaper than just buying the book outright. So if that does interest you, I'll leave my Patreon linked in all the usual places. So if you look at the percentage of dribblers he has tackled, it is fairly low, just over half, ranking in the 32nd percentile when compared against all other fullbacks in Europe's top 5 leagues over the past 365 days. And yes, I am comparing him to fullbacks for this metric, as midfielders are obviously not going to be as good in this regard. Now I should say that Nuno Mendes also ranks fairly low for this metric, but the context with that is Mendes is a high volume tackler and interceptor, whereas Dorgu isn't, and so that has to be factored in. And so the more Dorgu is expected to engage in these sort of tackles just like Mendes, the more he's going to struggle. And so this shows to me that despite the hype, United fans shouldn't expect Dorgu to come in and immediately look like the finished product, particularly defensively. Now like Nuno Mendes, Dorgu is also a very good ground eater. I know that doesn't mean he sits on the grass scooping mud into his hands and sampling it like an autistic kid in school. It means that when the space is in front of him, usually when the ball has been circulated from the other side, Dorgu has the pace over short and long distances alongside the ball carrying ability to be able to eat up those yards and drive dynamically into the space, something that is essential for progressing the ball past the opposition's midfield line, and you can see this statistically when compared against both fullbacks and midfielders, as Dorgu ranks very highly in the 75th to 85th percentile range or even higher for all three of these ball carrying metrics. However, like Mendes to be fair, Dorgu isn't a 1v1 isolationist, as seen with his fairly average successful take-ons and low percentage rate at which he completes them, and so he isn't a natural winger like an Ahmad, Matoma, Bino Gittins or a Nico Williams, who is going to be used as a wing-back primarily for his ability to beat men in 1v1s. But instead, like Mendes and Alvaro Fernandez, he's more of a runner and a ball carrier. But one thing that separates Dorgu from other young fullbacks is his progressive passing, as from the eye test he's definitely someone who's capable of playing those incisive passes infield, splitting the midfield line and being able to use quick 1-2s in wide positions in order to play around pressing players. Now whilst he does have the capabilities to move infield into more congested areas, I think in the Premier League he would struggle, as well as technically he is pretty good for a fullback. I just don't think he's as refined as he needs to be. sometimes leading to him getting caught on the ball and not being as efficient as I would like. And looking at his FB ref report, you can clearly see that even though he does have potential, consistency with his ball retention and progressive passing is still an issue. Now in the final third, he does rank incredibly highly for his non-penalty XG and his non-penalty goals, but you have to factor in this season that he's been playing mostly as a right winger, and so it isn't as impressive when comparing him as a fullback as you may think, but he certainly has the quality to be a threat. However, as a wing-back, considering he's mostly going to be released into wider positions, I have to say I'm not convinced that he's ready for that starting left wing-back role at United. Nuno Mendes is very good at bursting in behind the back line down the channel, also having a very good low cross or a cutback in his locker, whereas at the moment Dorgu doesn't have this accuracy in his crossing, often hitting the first man or failing to pick out a player. And so whereas in the middle third his strength is his ball carrying and even his progressive passing as well, in the final third I'm not convinced that he comes in as a starter and is the level that United need. So overall I do like Dorgu as he has huge potential because his skill set gives him huge versatility, as we've seen this season with him playing as a right winger, a right back, a left winger and of course at left back as well, which could definitely provide huge benefits for Amorim's possession system. However, I don't think he's at the level that United need right now, particularly considering he would cost around £30 million. And to me, it's yet another example of what I call new boyfriend syndrome, that so many of the Manchester United fan base, content creators, and even the board as well seemingly have in regards to transfers. And what I mean by this is that, you know, when a girl has a boyfriend for a while and she gets bored and she starts to look at other guys as a better option than her current boyfriend, not necessarily because he is, but simply because he's a new guy, and so her imagination is filling in the gaps because she doesn't know enough about him, making him out to be the perfect guy. Well, that's exactly what happens with this fan base and transfers. Now in the Dorgu situation, because we don't even have a viable left back or left wing back option, it's occurring with players that we have been or should have been linked with in that position. See, players like Alvaro Fernandez and Theo Hernandez are familiar names to the Manchester United fan base, and by now most of the fan base understands their game, their strengths and their weaknesses, and overall has a decent idea of their ability. However, with Dorgu being a completely fresh name who's only 20 years old, this allows the United fan base to fill in gaps with their own imagination, because they've only really seen a few selected clips of him, and so unlike with Theo Hernandez for example, who is currently in his prime, but still obviously has a few weaknesses in his game, mainly defensively, which likely aren't going to improve significantly throughout the rest of his career. With Patrick Dorgu, because of his age, people can just imagine that with his potential, even though he isn't at Theo's level now, in a year or so, once Amorim waves his magic wand over him, he's going to be as good as Theo offensively, but even better defensively, and he's going to develop into the best left wing back in the world. And because he's only 20, Manchester United will have the best wing back in the world for pretty much a decade, rather than say half a decade if we sign Theo, when in reality this is just a fantasy land. Because firstly, there's no guarantee Dorgu even gets to Theo's level at all throughout his career, potential isn't guaranteed. Secondly, even if he does get to Theo's level, because players tend to peak in their late 20s, that could take the best part of a decade. And thirdly, because people aren't watching him week in week out playing in the Premier League against Premier League standard players under the Manchester United spotlight, the weaknesses in his game are just being completely glossed over or are just unknown to many. And so given that Theo has 1 year left on his contract come the summer and has a consistent record of being one of the, if not the best offensive left back in world football for the past 3 to 4 seasons, why take such a risk with Dorgu if he's going to cost around the same amount? I mean, weighing up the risk, it just doesn't make sense. And this isn't even factoring in our FFP situation, the desperate need for investment in at least 3 or 4 other positions, and the fact that Alvaro Fernandez is available with a buyback that would amount to about a quarter of what Dorgu would cost, whilst also being more experienced, arguably better currently, and is far more proven, having been impressive in the Champions League, the Premier League with Benfica, and also in the Champions League as well. Once you look at it like that, it just seems like the type of transfer that has gotten us into this mess. We don't need another player that is in need of significant development to reach their potential right now, certainly not for a fee in the region of £30 million. Now I am going to do a separate video analysing why I think Manchester United should sign Alvaro Fernandez instead, analysing his performance against Barcelona, but I'm also going to suggest another name who is maybe just as good both in terms of current ability and potential as Dorgu, and would be available for about a third of the price. So make sure you subscribe to the channel and click the bell for that, and if you do want to sign up to my in-game Instagram group chat, I'll leave that linked on the end screen now.